born in Brisbane, raised on the Gold Coast. My mother and I once worked out in the first 4 years of my life, I think we moved 18 times.
Oh, wow, that's a lot.
And that's a bit of a reoccurring theme with my late great father, Johnny Paine, who, we could do an entire interview about him, but he was the classic bipolar before it was cool.
Oh.
So he was involved in entertainment. Mm-hmm. He was an entertainer himself.
What a surprise.
Exactly. A comedian, compere singer, did all this different stuff. So there was a lot of traveling. Very briefly had a live country music television show on the ABC network.
Okay.
Before Countdown or anything like that. It was like a country music of that. But again, with his bipolar, he told the director how to do it better. And the show got cancelled pretty quickly. So that was the legacy of the late, great Johnny Paine. So we moved around a lot, but then finally settled down on the Gold Coast. So,
okay.
Yeah.
And did you have like a religious upbringing?
My mum and dad got saved, properly saved, in a classic independent Baptist, Southern Conservative Baptist church on the Gold Coast in the 70s when I was probably about 4 or 5. And then it didn't take, long. I think I was about 7 years old, and the pastor delivered a very straightforward gospel message, just as I started playing on the organ, and down I walked, down the aisle, and I made it was a conviction of the heart at 7 years old that I wanted to be saved.
Yep.
And, and that's about as dramatic as a testimony I have. I don't have one of those testimonies where, and then I backslid into, there's nothing like that. It's just like, no, I walk forward. And from that moment, God has been faithful in my life to just I've grown in Him. For all those many, many years now. Mm-hmm. And, of course, there's moments of, rebellion and sin and everything else like that. But that was, that was my upbringing. I ended up running a youth group at the church that I was at by the time I was like 16, running Sunday school programs, going to Bible college. So there was always, I thought for a long time that I would end up in the ministry as far as a youth pastor or a pastor or something like that. Mm-hmm. God had other ideas, took me into more of a creative world, and now sort of come full circle all these years later. Now I'm sort of bringing the best of both of them together in radio.
Well, let's just backtrack a bit. I'm curious to know about the youth group years.
Yes.
Where were you a youth leader, and what did it look like?
Yeah, it was at the same church. So shout out. I think they're still going. It's not like what it used to be. Gold Coast Independent Baptist Church was where I was, raised as a young man. And we ran youth groups in Nerang, Gold Coast. The classic good old days where you literally took a 12-seater or a 24-seater van out there around Nerang, and you yell out, we've got a youth group in, and parents would literally be chucking their kids into the van. There was no, signed permission forms or anything like that. There was no working with kids cards. We would load, a 12-seater van would have 30 kids in it, and we would just do, it was back in the good old days of that, and we would play the craziest games that you wouldn't be allowed to play now. Like the most favourite one was fireball soccer. Uh-huh. We soaked a bunch of rags, tied them all very tightly into about the size of a soccer ball, soaked them in kerosene.
Oh my goodness.
Lit them on fire, and then, look, only a couple of kids ended up in hospital. No, I'm only joking. But we would do some crazy games on the old, youth group days back in the... Back in the late 80s, it would have been. Yeah,
fantastic, mate. And tell us a bit about what you did after school. Did you go to Bible college straight away?
So yeah, but pretty much worked saved up, went to Bible college pretty straight away. So there's been two passions in my life. Illustration and photography. I've always been attracted to that, that side of the arts and creativity, and then also, the Bible. Yep. Basically, if there's two things in my life, so there's always been a battle between the two. I thought I was going to become an illustrator. I thought I dabbled in it, did some work in graphic design, a sign business, illustration, worked for a few different people, but very quickly, wanted to get into Bible college and got a couple of years of that underneath my belt. No degrees or qualifications other than, just those, big Bible surveys. And the Bible college that I went to doesn't exist in Australia anymore. It's a worldwide ministry, Word of Life. Again, more on the conservative end of evangelical, type of spectrum there, but a very great, Bible overview and a very strong commitment to working in camp ministry, working with young people. So that's again, I thought maybe I'd end up in that, thing. So that's why I went in that direction for a long time.
Okay, and then what did you do after Bible college?
Well, then came back, travelled around a bit. We're now in the early 90s, early mid 90s. I was able to travel around the States for 6 months with about, $1,000 in my pocket, sleeping on people's couches. Back then you could get a ticket to Delta. They had a ticket available for people who lived out of the USA. And I think it was $700 Australian, and it was 60 days of unlimited travel within mainland USA. So there was times where I had nowhere to sleep. And so I would catch a long flight.
So you could sleep on the plane?
I would have to sleep and get fed on the plane.
Wow.
I did that for a while, and that I was able to go to a bunch of Christian music festivals.
Yeah.
And that really gave me, I got to see the birth of, some really independent record labels like Tooth and Nail and, some other dance and hip hop ones over there. And then I was able to come back to Australia, and I eventually ended up in Geelong, where working with a photographer, working in a church, helping out with the youth group, and then also on the side, working in radio and starting a Christian record label. If that wasn't,
Okay.
So all of the above, like I had my finger in everything. So shout out to Juice on the Gold Coast, which started off as Rima Gold Coast.
Yep.
96.3 in Geelong, which started off as Rima Geelong. I cut my teeth in radio in both of those places. And while doing that and going to Christian music festivals around Australia, had a real passion to see the Australian music scene, get built up. And I still have that same passion.
Yeah.
So for about a decade, we ran a record label called Mustard Records, in partnership with CMC Distribution down in Geelong. We signed bands like Sons of Cora and Compliments of Gus, things like that, and worked with a whole bunch of Australian Christian hip hop artists. Did a lot of live touring, DVDs, videos. We've done all the works, and had a lot of fun doing that. But after 10 years of it costing you a lot of money, you never make money in Christian record labels. Yeah. It's a great expense to have there. It was a lot of fun. That era of needing a record label sort of ended in the the mid-aughts there. So we sort of wrapped it up around then.
Well, have a listen to how our paths must have crossed back then. So,
yes.
1990,
I
come to the Lauderdale Youth Camp, and I start a Christian radio show in Coffs Harbour called The Jesus Rock Show.
subtle, very subtle,
yeah.
Very subtle. Man.
And I used to get CDs from CMC.
Oh wow! Yeah,
remember CDs? Those
yes. And back then they might have even had the 4 stickers: buy 4 get 1 free.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, and so I was playing all those kind of Christian artists.
Yes,
and anything from Australia we'd love to play.
Yeah,
most of it was from America, but we'd get any Aussie artists we could.
Yeah,
and I fell in love with Christian music back then.
Yes.
And remember back in the day, there was Sunfest at Boona.
Yes.
And then there was the AGMF, which then became Easterfest.
Yes.
And Black Stump in Sydney.
Oh, look.
I used to go to all of them, mate.
Well, our paths would have crossed because, we ran stages, we ran tents, we ran, venues and events at all of those festivals back in the day. So, and brought out artists from America. We toured artists from the States and, had a great time doing that over here.
Yeah, fantastic, mate. Well, I just think Christian music is so powerful. And I've been listening to you on the radio a bit lately, and you love your flashbacks. you love to talk about, this album was from this year, and it was written by this, and So just take us back to your earlier years in Christian music. Who was some of your first artists that really impacted you?
Like I get into music when you're about, again, now it's a lot younger. Kids are exposed to it a little bit differently these days. But for me, I sort of discovered music in, when I was about 12 or 13, sort of entering high school, you got to sort of, and back then when, because we're old, your whole identity was around the type of music that you listen to, there's the hard rock crew and there's the heavy metal guys, there's the emo guys, there's the hip hop, whatever it is. And I loved everything. I just loved everything. And then, by listening to everything, and going to a very conservative church, I would often get convicted that I was listening to too much secular music. And so, you discover Amy and Michael and all the classics. Back in the olden days, David Meese was an early one.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
People were giving me these albums, and a lot of it was, I thought, okay, this is okay. It's very poppy. It's a little bit cheesy. And then I discovered Keith Green.
Oh yeah.
Someone gave me a compilation of Keith Green, and again, Keith at the best of times can be as cheesy and goofy as anybody else.
Yeah.
But there's a sincerity.
Oh yeah.
To Keith. And there's a songwriting craftsmanship that is just rivaled, still unrivaled.
Yeah.
And that really turned me around and turned me on to the fact that this is a genre that should be respected in of itself, even though it's so wide as far as genres go. And then I discovered Christian hip hop and, Christian rock and Christian this and Christian that. And it's just been an ever-growing love affair for me.
Yeah.
Of wanting to understand it, catalogue it, and be across it, because I get upset. So many Christians don't harness the power of Christian music in their life. It can be, and it doesn't. And when we talk about the power of Christian music in someone's life, a lot of times people just think of worship music, and that has its place. It's fantastic. But there's a lot of other genres and a lot of other moods or modes that I think God can use in our life with different genres. So I'm still just as passionate about it as I've always been.
So good, mate. Well, I'll have to share a couple of my stories on that too. So my mum was right into Christian music when I first came to the Lord.
Yeah.
And she used to have Larry Norman albums.
Yeah.
And I remember
Visiting the Planet and
the cassette tape of Steve Grace, Children of the Western World.
Classic.
White Heart, Don't Wait for the Movie,
the best.
Yep. So all those, bands that you were talking about around this, and I didn't discover Keith Green until a little bit later, which I regret, because he's definitely in my top 5 right now. You got Third Day as number 1 for me, and then probably Casting Crowns and Switchfoot.
Yes,
and then Keith Green's up there somewhere.
My taste is a little bit more alternative. I still love discovering new Christian music. It's my favorite thing to do. New artists around the world. And this is the wonderful era that we live in with streaming music. I know it's hard for Christian artists because they don't make any money from it. I understand that. But I tell you what, the trade-off of me being able to discover a brand new musician who's blowing my socks off, and he's from Nigeria. Or he's from Zimbabwe, and I'm like, I would have never been able to find this before, but here he is just alongside everybody else, and like all the latest bands that are coming out of the UK are just blowing me away. There's a scene happening over there that is just so creative and so interesting. So I'd love to hopefully one day, and this is me even. One of the reasons why I took this role at Vision, because I see, Vision, the Christian, organisation of Vision being an Australia-wide organisation, and I think we could do a lot more of championing alternative Christian music, different Christian music, but also Australian Christian music.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Yep. Well, it's changed so much. I mean, we used to have Easter Fest every year was our big event, but now that's finished.
Yeah.
And since COVID, there aren't many great events going on.
No.
But you can do a lot of stuff online.
Exactly.
Radio, So, mate, I'm just curious to know, I've looked up your website, right? And it's got there that you're a professional music geek, an amateur Bible nerd. Now, I love the way you've described yourself. I'm curious to know what's your habits when it comes to the Word of God? Do you do daily devotions?
Yes.
Do you have a blog that you do? Like, how do you get into the Word?
I'm a big one, and I rabbit on about this all the time. The Word of I'm amazed, and I think it was because I was raised in a church where the Word of God was just read daily.
Yeah.
Not glamour. You weren't like having an emotional, like, it wasn't like flipping it open and God speaking to me out of the Word and, this is the verse I needed just for the day. Not that there's anything wrong with it. Don't get me wrong. But it was a methodical, right, we're reading these 3 chapters today as we work our way through the Word of God.
Good.
And that was my culture. And it wasn't until I started visiting other churches where I would talk to people, and people would talk to me, and this might be you listening right now. I would talk to them about reading the entire Bible, and people would talk to me about it as if I was talking about climbing Everest, or as if I was talking about that impossible thing that might happen one day in their life.
Yeah,
if only they could get to the right place, they will get to the place where they could read the entire Bible. And I was like, don't get me wrong, the Bible is the Bible. It's just a book. It's just reading pages a day and you will get through it. It's not impossible. If I've done it multiple times in my life, any dum-dum can do it. That is why, I'm very passionate about reading plans that take people through, whether it's a year, 2 years. I'm actually working on one myself right now. I'm writing one. I've written a few chronological reading plans in different orders, but I'm working on a 3-year plan.
Wow, that's great.
And I think 3 years, working yourself through the entire Bible is a very manageable pace. You're nearly at about a chapter a day.
Yeah.
And you've got time to process it, think about it. So I'm working on some ways how I can encourage and walk with people to read through the entire Bible at the moment in 3 years. That's my next little project. It's a bit of exclusive. There's an exclusive here for you, Matt.
Breaking news. Well, I just have loved getting to know you lately, and I love your enthusiasm. I love your heart for God, for Christian music, for the Word. And, mate, it's such a blessing to connect. If people want to find out more, you're on pretty much every social media platform you can think of.
Just Google search DJ Paine, Paine, whatever your weapon of choice is, I'm probably there. Or you can find my website. The easiest one is DJP. That's for my name, DJ Paine. DJP.fm. Nice and short. It's only 5 letters long. If you go there, you can find all my connections there.
Well, DJ, I reckon you're a history maker. Thanks for joining us.
Bless you, mate.